Hi, I'm William Schroeder, and I'm a director at Just Mind, and today I am going to be talking about ADD, communication, and relationships. Um, we have a number of people that come in for couples counseling and individual counseling where ADD is a theme, and one of the things that commonly comes up is communication in those ADD relationships. So, what's an example of that? Well, part of it is to try and have specific complaints and requests, so that way you can say, when X happened, I felt Y, and I want Z. That's something that helps you to try and go and not have it string along to all of this past history of where there's this long case history of a person having done something wrong. It's more of, in this moment, here's what happened, this is the way that it made me feel, and this is what I would like. So that way it doesn't make the person feel as attacked, and also makes them less defensive, and can help you to be able to try and move forward through kind of whatever that difficulty is, as well as giving specific feedback for what you'd like in the future. Um, don't assume what each other might be thinking. That's another point, just because that's something that a lot of couples will do. Sometimes that's assuming kind of the thing that they could do that has the most value to their partner, of it being like, well, I'll just go and I'll make dinner my way, as opposed to potentially like inquiring what they and the kids might like, or if there's something that the other person had been planning. But it's basically, not assuming anything, trying to check in and be able to know. That way you can understand what contributes the most value to each other on kind of a day-to-day basis. Um, Turning towards your partner is important. That could be as simple as, let's say you're working on your computer and your partner comes into the room and they say, and they're wanting to talk with you. Trying to close the lid on the laptop, or to, turn away from what you're doing, and, letting them know that you have their full and undivided attention. If there's something that's in the back of your mind that you have to get back to, letting them know, being like, okay, I can talk for about 5 minutes, but I really need to get back to this, connecting them with that. And turning towards your partner is a really important example. Gottman talks a lot about it in his different research as well. It's one of those things that tends to help relationships grow and work through difficulties. Practicing redos, that's something that I even practice. I try and practice all of this in my own marriage as well, but it's important for any relationship. Looking at kind of a difficult moment, trying to come back to it and trying to approach it. In the book Getting Past No, it was a book that I had read in business school, but it certainly ties into this as well. It talks about coming to the balcony of the problem together, looking at what happened, and kind of trying to understand it together. So that way it's not about, here's what you did wrong. It's more of like, okay, how could we do this differently next time? If we encounter the same thing, how do we learn from this and try and get better? So another point is accepting differences, and with accepting differences, it can mean even looking at your partner's differences as kind of being like a blind spot detector. So that way you don't collide with different things that are there. Part of the reason why we're typically attracted to somebody is because of our differences with them, and that we find those things really thrilling and new and different when we first get together, and sometimes over time we can even get frustrated with those differences too. So we try and look for the positive that's in their feedback, and to try and look for the truth that may be there to try and help us. One last point is to avoid tripwires. Something that I also see sometimes come up with in ADD relationships is people starting to kind of point to the ADD a lot, being like, oh, that's because you're ADD that you forgot this. You want to try and avoid that as much as you can. Certainly it's like, just like if it were a physical injury, if somebody, say, had an injury that made it so they had, say, a prosthetic leg, you wouldn't go and be like, oh, it's because your prosthetic leg that you tripped. You try and go and try and say, like, okay, so how do we avoid this again? Maybe we could try this differently, so that way it doesn't trip you up. Same thing with ADD stuff. It's not always focusing on it as the diagnosis being a problem. It's ultimately, any kind of diagnosis is a cluster of symptoms. And so the goal being to try and look at, like, how do we have better symptom management there? And that's something that we work on a lot in therapy as well, and trying to help couples to be able to kind of keep focused on these different things, because it's easy to let those things kind of slip out of sight. All right, and if you have any other questions, you can go to justmind.org. You can also tweet us at justmind is our Twitter handle, and let us know anything that you'd like us to write about in the future.